Good morning, everyone. If we haven't met, my name is Will Stewart, and I'm the Executive Director of Leadership New Hampshire, a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to build a community of informed and engaged leaders here in the Granite State. And today, I have the privilege of welcoming you all to the first ever Civics 101 Summit organized by New Hampshire Public Radio. Who's excited to be here? Yeah. That's the kind of enthusiasm I love to hear when it comes to civic engagement. So I'd like to start by offering a special thank you to Southern New Hampshire University for hosting us here today. SNHU has been a wonderful partner in supporting community dialogue and educational initiatives like this summit, and we're grateful for the opportunity to gather here on their beautiful campus on this beautiful fall day. We're here today because we recognize the importance of civic engagement in our communities and beyond. Civic engagement is the foundation of a healthy democracy, and it calls upon us all to be informed, involved, and ready to take action on the issues that matter most. Starting, but not ending, with voting, each of us plays a role in shaping the future of our communities, our state, and our country. At a time when political divisions seem deeper than ever, maintaining civil discourse is crucial. We may not always agree on policy or politics, but it is our ability to listen, to engage respectfully, and to find common ground that will allow us to move forward together. Today's summit is an opportunity to practice that kind of engagement, to learn from one another, share ideas, and discuss solutions for how to better engage in the civic sphere so that we can better address the challenges we face as a society. We will begin today by experiencing a live production of NHPR's award-winning Civics 101 podcast, hosted by Hannah McCarthy and Nick Capodice. Immediately following, yeah, you can clap for that. They're the stars of the show, and we are here and excited. Immediately following the live production of Civics 101, attendees have their choice of one of 3 breakout sessions, which I encourage you to fully dive into. These sessions will feature on-the-ground experts doing some pretty impressive civic engagement work and really making a difference in our communities. These breakout sessions include navigating civics in the classroom. In this session, join educators and students from across New Hampshire for an interactive workshop about civics, conflict, and how to keep things positive. The session aims to leave you with the beginnings of a toolkit for good conflict. Panelists include Moises Nunez of New Hampshire Listens and Kelsey Brooke Eckert of the Remedial Herstory Project, with Bree Panette, a senior at Groveton High School in Northumberland, facilitating the conversation. Up next is Inspiring the Next Generation into Action. This interactive session seeks to highlight why engagement in our civic structures, including voting, is important more than every 4 years, and it will give you an opportunity to explore what opportunities you can take part in your own communities. I will moderate this discussion that features Sam Casson, High School Voter Registration Coordinator for Open Democracy in New Hampshire, and Shanae Clifford from Next Gen New Hampshire. Finally, if you just can't get enough of Civics 101, and who can't, you can join Hannah, Nick, and senior producer Christina Phillips, who want to know what questions you have about creating a podcast. This is an opportunity for a lively conversation with the award-winning team behind Civics 101. Also, just a reminder that you are encouraged to eat your lunch in your breakout session. You can grab your lunch out in the lobby where you just came in, between the doors of the auditorium, and then head directly to your assigned room. I'm excited for the conversations and insights that will come from today, and I hope you'll leave feeling more empowered to engage in your communities and more hopeful about the potential for constructive dialogue, even in these polarized times. Thank you again for being here today, and I look forward to the great discussions ahead. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to one of the hosts of NHPR's Civics 101, Nick Capodice. Nick has been the co-host and educational outreach producer for Civics 101 since 2018, where he creates episodes and works with teachers across the country to design lessons plans to pair with the show. Nick.
Hey, thank you. Hello. Thank you, Will. Hi, everybody. Hi. Thank you, Will. Before I begin today's business, there's sort of a special, is Keith Thompson in the room today? Hi, so I was just informed the #1 employee at New Hampshire Public Radio in the history of the world has joined us here today, and we're so grateful. I'm so grateful. I wouldn't be here. So there's an aphorism. It's often attributed to Confucius that if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And that's how I was going to start today's beginning remarks. But because I do what I love, I went and researched that, and I found out Confucius never said that at all. Ben Franklin never said democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. And P.T. Barnum never said a sucker is born every minute. Really. Yeah, nobody's name got changed at Ellis Island. Civics 101 was not created to be in the myth-busting business, but in an era of both declining journalism and a growth in dis and misinformation. Myth-busting is part of the game. Before I launch into who we are and what we're doing today, I would like to shout out a couple folks now. A huge thank you to our sponsors, Capital Roofing, New Hampshire Bar Foundation, New Futures, Upton Hatfield, New Hampshire Democracy Fund, Forward Foundation, Next Gen America, Mitchell Municipal Law Group, and Fidelity Investments. And a huge special thank you to our event partners, New Hampshire PBS, New Hampshire Civics, and our host, Southern New Hampshire University. Thank you. Yeah. So I have a question for everybody here. Have you ever found yourself thinking, if only people knew how things were supposed to work, or if people understood that the way things might be working isn't normal, or if only people had a stronger foundational understanding of history and civics, they might make better decisions, or post better things on Facebook, or they would, this is the most important one to me, cast votes that actually benefit them and their community's best interests. There's some nodding. It's okay to admit it. To say that civics education is grossly underfunded in the United States is a significant understatement. In 2016, the federal government spent $48 per student per year on STEM education, and I love STEM. But civics education, 5 cents. A nickel, which is mostly made out of copper, by the way. And you could say that that nickel is the reason our show was created. Civics 101 started in 2016 after the election of Donald Trump, and it was originally supposed to be a project that ended shortly after his inauguration, after the first 100 days in office. The idea was we had an incoming president who was promising to fundamentally change the structures of our government. So Civics 101's mission was to explain, how does it work in the first place? Why? And here we are, not 100, but 8 years later. Here we are, 8 years later, and the questions we get asked every day on our show, they're still important, no matter who's in office. The show, as it turns out, is more important and, interestingly enough, more popular than it's ever been. Right now, Civics 101 episodes are being downloaded by over 200,000 listeners, 350,000 times a month. We've reached over 26 million downloads. There are people from all ages, all around the world. Thank you. But the biggest thing, Hannah and I often say our secret audience, for whom we actually make our shows, is that we are we make shows for teachers and their students. Our general listenership is not teachers and students, but teachers and students do listen to our show. They use us in the classroom. And recently, we've become a staple in the curricula of history and social studies teachers around the country, textbooks, including SNHU. And we collaborate with educators to make free things they can download to help them incorporate the show into their class. And a great joy is that we never run out of episode ideas, because listeners are always writing into us and suggesting things, and teachers are writing in. And thus we have episodes on things that aren't like, how does the bill become a law? We have an episode on, does the president actually control the price of gas in any way whatsoever? No! I could have been a 1-second episode. We have episodes on famous federal trials, like the Rosenberg's trial. We have an episode on Muhammad Ali's fascinating trial. How cities get chosen for the Olympics. How school lunch became political. That's one of my favorite episodes Hannah recently did. And on a teacher's recommendation, we made a series on landmark Supreme Court cases, for which we won the Silver Gavel Award from the American Bar Association. Thank you. And last but not least, my true favorite episode ever made for Civics 101, a 2-part series on the American Girl dolls, which if you haven't listened to, please listen to that. So what you're going to see in a second is a live version of our show. We're going to do it live. We're going to put it in our feed. It's going to go, it's going to go on the website. It's going to be broadcast on New Hampshire Public Radio. And we're very excited to do that today. Hannah and I have made, 300 episodes more over the last 6+ years, but we have never done a live show. So, yeah, I'm glad you're all here, the friendly room. So last thing, we literally can't do our show. We cannot make Civics 101 we can't make a weekly podcast about civics without support from listeners. So if you're inspired at any point to help the show out, I invite you to just check out our website, civics101podcast.org, and click on the donate link. One day we'll be working on like selling t-shirts and hats, but until that time. So thank you for supporting our work. Thank you for being here this morning. And we are going to begin. And to begin, I have to invite onto the stage the person without whom Civics 101 would not exist. Hannah McCarthy came to New Hampshire Public Radio after a career as a reporter for New York Magazine. Oh, there she is. She came out before the introduction was done. Hannah worked at Death, Sex, and Money at WNYC. We have co-hosted the show since 2018. She is the best colleague I've had in my entire life. Everything I can do, she can do better, backwards and heels, which to my chagrin, Ginger Rogers never actually said. No. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's true. I didn't know it either until I started writing this thing. Hannah McCarthy, the creator of today's episode, and should we get going?
I think so, but there's someone else we need out here.
There certainly is.
Yeah.
The most important part for today,
Yeah.
our senior producer, Christina Phillips, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yes.
Shall we begin? You good, Christina? Yeah? Can everyone hear us? Are we? Yeah? All right.
Yeah, the volume's all right?
All
Okay.
right. Hello, everyone. I am Hannah McCarthy, as Nick mentioned.
Yeah, I'm Nick Capodice, and before we go a step further, I want everyone to know that what you're going to see and hear today is not a pre-produced display of incredibly realistic holograms. We are, in fact, flesh and blood, corpus, standing on this stage, and what is going to happen is happening the moment it happens and not a moment before.
What Nick is trying to tell you all is that we might and probably will make mistakes.
Yeah,
So
the thrill and danger of live theater.
we will be reading from scripts right in front of us, just as we do for every episode of Civics 101, except this time we will not have the option of cutting out our flubs.
Yeah, I'm the bigger flubber of the two of us, so if I flub during a thing, I'll just pause and take it over again. Also, like in a regular episode of Civics 101, there's going to be moments where we're going to say, like, and now we're going to take a quick break. There will be no break. The break is a lie. The cake is a lie. And, we're going to turn this into a podcast later, so it's all for the best.
Yeah, basically, when we say we're going to take a break, it's not actually happening. Remain seated. There will be no intermission.
And last thing, this is being recorded. It is my journalistic duty to share with you that it's my personal duty to encourage you to laugh at my bad jokes. And that is, I think you've got the cards. Christina has been taking the answers from the cards that many of you filled out beforehand. And let's get on to the business we call show.
It's like no business I know, Here we go again. I'm Hannah McCarthy.
I'm Nick Capodice.
And this is Civics 101. You are listening to it, and for the first time ever seeing it, thank you for being here. I welcome you. Nick, they say that you should do this thing when you're like conceiving of a podcast. You're supposed to sort of envision the person that you're making the podcast for. So like, what do they look like?
Yeah.
What do they eat for dinner? What do they do for fun? What kind of music do they listen to? What kind of clothes do they wear? Can you picture someone?
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now?
I always do when I write episodes. I like the person I'm picturing is usually wearing like a floral print shirt with like a gray cardigan and a headband. Mm-hmm. And maybe her parents were deeply involved in politics and she's fond of listening to show tunes. That's my like fantasy audience member.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to someone.
I feel like I can see them right now.
Yep.
Like I can see it, I can really see
The imagination is a powerful thing.
it. Yeah. So this is actually relevant to today's show because this episode is all about you, the listener, the audience member. It's about you as you are right now, a human being in today's America, a person who has the capacity for something that could very well alter the course of history, both yours and your community.
Hey, have you heard of the phrase, overpromise, underdeliver?
No, I never have, Nick. I'm a millennial, and I studied theater in southern Vermont, so I was really taught to dream.
Yeah, I was not taught to dream.
Yeah.
All right, so what are we doing here today, though? Like, what are you getting at?
What I'm getting at is civics.
All right. Shocker.
I know. I like to keep people on their toes.
I'm going to hear you out, but this is interesting because this is something we never actually do on the show. We have never defined civics. It's the name of our show, but like, what does it mean?
Civics at its core is about educating people so that we can learn how to govern ourselves.
That was Raj Vinakota. He's the president of the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Foundation. Also, importantly, Raj spends his days looking at how civic education works in America, and it's his job to figure out how to make it better.
This is about making sure that we, as a citizenry, can engage in the most important act in our society. Self-government. Some people call it democracy. Other people call it a republic. Other people call it a constitutional democracy. At its core, it's about doing the work of deciding, of coming to consensus, and engaging in our communities for the best of all.
Now, I do want to pause on that note because Raj said self-government.
Yeah.
Do we self-govern? No, we are governed by the government. That is not self-governance, is it?
Nick, that is a really good question.
Well, you wrote it, Hannah.
I did. So 11 years ago, a bunch of guys got together and wrote the Union's second Constitution.
What do you mean by the second Constitution?
The first one did not work out very well. The Articles of Confederation. Have we all heard of that? The Articles of Confederation. Nick, why didn't the Articles work out?
I actually knew this one. Lots of reasons. Many of you know them here in the room. Anybody in the great state of New Hampshire may be interested in this one. Number one, the Articles of Confederation made taxes voluntary.
And naturally, everyone volunteered to pay their taxes.
Hilarious. They didn't at all. So without taxes, the federal government couldn't fund itself or pay back the enormous debt to the European countries who helped us out during the Revolutionary War. Also, there was no uniform currency under the Articles of Confederation. So the federal government had its own money, and the states had their own money. So trade was really hard.
Can you just picture that?
Yeah,
This
I've
is
seen
the
the notes.
current-
They're beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like Rhode Island's
Let's go
currency.
back to
Yeah, let's
that.
go back to that.
And you know, it wasn't just really hard within this country, right? It was really hard trading with other countries when we have all of these forms of currency, which makes it hard to establish yourself as a country on planet Earth.
Yeah, and states, individual states, had their own individual foreign policy. What a mess. If you think the Constitution is hard to amend right now, and it's very hard to do, try amending it with the Articles rules. It needed unanimous state consent to amend the Articles. And when it came to laws, like if you had a federal law, 9 out of 13 states had to agree to it for it to be a law, to be passed. Good luck with that.
So basically what we're describing is an original form of government with a super weak central government that left most of the power up to the states. Why did we do that?
Why did we have a super weak central government? We had been burned pretty badly before.
Yeah, go on.
Just if you all remember where we came from, we were 13 British colonies and we were fed up, so we fought a war. And that war was so we didn't have to have a king. And we're going to make sure that it never happens again.
You know what that sounds like, Nick?
What's it sound like, McCarthy?
It sounds like we wanted to govern ourselves.
All right. Okay, self-governance. All right. Okay, I'll give you that one. Except we found out when you leave everything pretty much up to the states, they just act like their own little countries. And that kind of diminishes the whole idea of the union, the united part of the United States of America.
Yeah, so, you know, still, the framers then staged a coup when they realized their mistake. They rewrote the Constitution, kind of in secret. Self-governance, though, that was still paramount. Representation. They debated that for a long time. The big thing about our government would still be the will of the people. So yes, the federal government would be more powerful under this new constitution, but states would still get to pick who got that power, and it would not be a king.
So that's what you mean when you're talking about self-government under the current Constitution.
That is what I mean. And the absolutely crucial piece of that puzzle, of course, is all of you. You are tasked with deciding. That is Raj, the man who we heard from earlier, that is Raj Vinakoda's point. So what is civics? Civics is, in part, understanding what it means to live in a precious and quite precarious state of self-governance. How do you do that? Raj breaks it down into 3 steps.
Okay, so what does that require us to do? Or said differently, what is an effective citizen? Well, back in 2019, I helped to lead a project that actually focused on this issue, and we came to a consensus definition of what it means to be an effective and engaged citizen. And there are 3 categories to this. The first is that effective citizens are civically well-informed. What does that mean? It means that you understand how your government functions, the historical underpinnings for why we got to where we are. You get your information from multiple and diverse sources, and you have the skills to be able to discern, differentiate among fact, opinion, misinformation, and disinformation.
That is no short order. We have talked about this on our show. A lot of times it's difficult to combat mis and disinformation. It takes a lot of work. So what are the other 2 categories?
The second category is that you are productively engaged for the common good. The obvious part of this category is, of course, you vote. In addition to that, however, you also engage in your community. You volunteer, you mentor, you run for office. And then finally, you have the skills to be able to engage in thoughtful civil discourse, even with people with whom you don't agree.
So what Raj means is you show up.
Yeah, but I do want to come back to the civil discourse thing.
Oh, we're gonna.
Okay, because what does that even mean, right? That is one of the most commonly used phrases, and it's grown more and more. Every year that I live in this world, it's used more and more. What is civil discourse? But I have to start with saying this. These things that Raj is mentioning, they are not easy.
It's interesting that you say that, because I feel like I remember someone saying that, we Americans, we don't do things because they're easy.
But because they are hard.
Well, that was the moon, Hannah.
And other things.
And do the other things.
Fair enough.
You know what, Nick, though? You are right. Former President John F. Kennedy was mostly talking about the moon. And so civic engagement should be a breeze in comparison to the moon. Okay, so there's one last step, right? Raj has a 3rd step.
The third and final category is that you're committed to democracy in America. And this commitment is based upon notions of trust. You trust your government. You trust your institutions. You trust your neighbor, even if he or she did not necessarily vote the same way that you did. And then you have a commitment and a hope about the direction of the country. So as you can see, this is a much broader definition of what an effective citizen is. It's not simply about understanding the Constitution. It's not simply about voting, but it's much more than that. It is literally working and governing ourselves and having the knowledge, skills, and capacity to do so.
I do want to get back to what he said about trust. And I'm serious here. Anybody in this room who has been neglected by another person or another institution knows how difficult that trust is.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think the trust element is a little bit closer to the moon in terms of how achievable that is. But we have flags that say that we can get there. American flags on the moon. I'm talking about American flags on the moon. It's like a metaphor thing.
Oh yeah, I
that
got you.
Okay. So that's what civics is. Civics is about you, all of you accepting and fulfilling the quite weighty responsibility that we specifically fought for. We are in charge of ourselves. We're in charge of educating ourselves, knowing where we are, what happened here, who is in charge of us, and why, and what they're able to do. Voting, community service, running for office, behaving, and conversing in a civil way, which I really want to talk about.
Just a whole, like 30 seconds. I just need you to stop for one bit.
We're in the middle of a show, so
This is part of it. Go with it. This was written down weeks in advance. This is the point of the show when I go from being sort of the lovable, uninformed prompter to being the foil.
The role you were born to play.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this. Because I already said civics is hard, but we didn't talk about why civics is hard. Why do people fail to volunteer for community service? Why do people fail, and they do so frequently, to behave in a civil way? I know there's a lot of reasons, but I'm going to hazard the big one, the biggest of all, is they don't have time for that.
That's fair, but we're journalists, right? Like, we can't make assumptions. So we should ask people. Actually, we did ask people. Christina?
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so Christina, before the show, we asked the audience to fill out a little survey. Thank you all for doing so. And my understanding is that you have the answers to that survey.
Yes, I am holding these answers from our audience in our hands.
All right.
Do you want to hear the question that we had for
Yes.
this audience?
Yes, please.
So, what do you think makes civic participation a challenge for you or people you know, if you happen to be one of those people that's so civically engaged that you don't even have any challenges?
All right, so what did people say in this one?
All right, so we've got shyness, too much judgment around one's opinions from others, fear of being judged. People are so overextended and stressed with their everyday lives that sometimes they either forget or are unable to fully participate in civics life. I hear that. Apathy and a lack of awareness of how our systems work. And then we've got time or a lack thereof, time commitment, time, and time.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Thank you, Christina. Okay, so audience, we see you, we get it, and we are not the only ones who see you and get it.
Time is precious, and I get it.
This is Mustafa Santiago Ali. Mustafa is someone who has devoted his entire life to civil service, both in the government and out.
I've been working on social justice issues since I was 16. I was lucky I came out of a family, that was very focused on civil rights and workers' rights.
Wait, Mustafa, you interviewed him, he worked at the EPA, right?
Yeah, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency.
So we do this thing sometimes with initialisms and acronyms where we're not sure if the audience knows what we're talking about, so we try to make it feel natural. So if we say like AARP, the American Association of Retired People, like we do that all the time. It felt natural, right?
Right. I think, yeah. So Mustafa was at the EPA for 24 years before he left.
I worry about it every day, and I have to take some responsibility myself. I resigned. I was the highest ranking federal official who resigned when President Trump came in. I knew I had a responsibility based upon the oath that I took and when I raised my right hand to do everything I could for my country, and I did not feel that I would be able to do that.
And just a reminder for anyone who may have forgotten, while running for office in 2016, former President Donald Trump promised to mostly dismantle the EPA to help the federal budget.
He did, and I share this information about Mustafa to make something very clear. This is an individual who is deeply, deeply devoted to serving his country, enough to pivot if he is concerned that he will not be able to. And we cannot all be like Mustafa.
And I understand, trust me, folks trying to put food on the table, trying to keep the lights on, save a couple of dollars, that's priority.
It's just like my friend Oli has said to me, no, Hannah, I did not read that Supreme Court opinion that you sent me. I have a job.
That's a really decent point. Oli's always got the decent points. You and I and Mustafa, we have the time to really care about this because it is our job, but other people can't devote their whole lives to it.
I'm going to argue that they can.
Really? Gauntlet thrown.
In a way. Okay, so let's take voting.
Take my voting, please.
That's not all the jokes should make it in, I think, maybe.
We can edit that one out in post.
We acknowledge that.
My Henny Youngman references should just get them right out.
Well, for me, the act of voting is incredibly important, but not enough. You need to be an educated voter.
All right, can we quickly talk about why we're supposed to be educated voters? Because honestly, people say that all the time, but I'd like you to break it down.
So think about what happens when someone is elected. Think about what they get when we put them in office.
These folks actually have a huge amount of power over our lives, right? They have power that impacts both economics and housing and transportation and the environment and climate and so on and so on and so on. So we've got to carve out a little bit of time and read and then be able to make the best decisions possible.
Can I ask the audience a quick question?
Yeah, they're
All
right
right. Show of hands, honestly here, have any of you in this room ever been in the voting booth on election day with your phone Googling a candidate because you didn't do the research first? Oh, thank heavens.
Yeah.
Wait, you?
Well,
I just want to say, as the voice of the audience, a lot of people raise their hands for what it's worth, for
Yeah.
everyone at home.
yeah. You know, we're all human. And let me say this, Nick, okay? Like, I am not just trying to convince you that, you know, we should be as engaged as we should be. I am not just trying to convince all of you. I am also trying to convince me, okay? So here's how I think about it, and here's how I think you should think about it. Nick, what do you do before you make a big purchase, like you're going to buy a car?
Right. I see where you're going. I do research beforehand.
Like, you probably do
Look
a
stuff
lot
up.
of research. You probably do it before you show up at the car dealership.
Full disclosure, I have never been to a car dealership in my entire life. I learned to drive when I was 39. I don't think I'll ever own a new car, but that's just me. But if I did, if I were the kind of responsible human who could buy a new car, I would, do my research before I went to the dealership.
Why is that?
Because a car is a major investment. I'm going to use it most days of my life. I'm going to drive my kids around in it. I'm going to have it for years, I hope. I want to make sure that it won't break down and cost a boatload of money.
Okay, so you do your research to try to make sure that you're investing wisely. You want a car that is safe, reliable, trustworthy. A car that will do what you need it to do, or at least what its ads promise to do. A car with a good track record. A car that won't become a burden on your nation or your wallet, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have a lot of options. You have a lot of choices. At least you hope that you make the right choice. So you do your research, and if you're really smart about it, you also ask around.
There are a lot of people who are asking for our vote. So we need to be at the opportunities where they are to ask them the questions about, where do you stand on this? And what does your track record look like on these types of things? And then make the best decision for you and your family. But let's not just give anyone our vote without doing our own due diligence, because there are huge ramifications.
I think especially in New Hampshire, people understand that. People understand talking to people, getting to know people before they cast their vote. There are huge ramifications in choosing something that will affect your daily life, the well-being of your family, your ability to smoothly move through things without constant nasty surprises. And I'm not talking about cars anymore, Nick.
I think that's been abundantly clear for several minutes.
The point that I'm trying to make is that most of us, honestly, we do research constantly, not just about cars. We research the food that we're gonna buy and eat. We research, our own health. Hello, WebMD. We research education and housing and employment, all of which could at some point be supported or undermined by the people for whom we vote. So people can tell me that they don't have time to get to know their candidates. But that's not what they're really saying.
What are they really saying?
What they are really saying is they don't care.
Nope. You're telling me that everyone in this room who raised their hand, including us, these good people, don't care.
I don't think that this live audience of a Civics 101 show is representative of the American populace.
That's fair, and that's probably true. But I think a lot of people, and I dare say most people, do care a lot about who is in charge, who is making decisions, and what those decisions are.
I totally agree with you.
You do. I thought that was going to be a much tougher argument.
Okay, so I do think people care about who's in charge, but it's not the same thing as caring about your car or your job. I mean, when there are so many decisions that we make that really do matter. We can feel the positive or negative impact of those decisions that we make. Think about how your choice in the voting booth stacks up against that. Why would we put the same care into that? Why, when your choice is one of millions, when the system is often actively set up to dilute some choosers and overpower other choosers, when that choice that we make disappears into this opaque and mysterious world of secret meetings and billion-dollar deals and uniform haircuts, why would you care?
You have basically just convinced me, Hannah, that being an educated voter does not matter at all.
I am going somewhere with this.
Good.
And I'm going to try to get there after a quick break.
Remember we said the break is a lie. There's no break.
There's no break.
We're not taking one. But in the podcast, you'd hear, Brian Cox talk about McDonald's for like 5 seconds.
Or you try to sell Indeed ads, Nick, which
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard so many times.
I hire people all the time.
Nick has never
we're-
actually hired anyone.
Sorry. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We're back. We are on a little journey of Hannah's making today. She is trying to take us to a new plane of civic life in America. And Hannah, before the break, you basically were like, why would anyone feel like they matter in American democracy? And honestly, that made me very sad.
I'm going to bring you down even lower before I lift you back up.
I think that we're on life support as a democracy.
This is Kim Whaley. She is a constitutional law professor and author of several books, including What You Need to Know About Voting and Why. And Nick, this is why you would care.
Constitution is just a piece of paper with job descriptions. If it's not enforced, the piece of paper doesn't mean anything.
And what is the way, sometimes the only way, that most of us here in this room can help to enforce the Constitution of the United States?
The only thing left is the ballot box. That's it. So that's part of why, it's an imperfect system, but it's all we have.
Yeah, but Hannah, that imperfect system is, I think, to your own point, that is the reason why so many people become disengaged.
But why some say the moon?
Some politicians might as well be on the moon.
Yeah.
We all have job descriptions when we have a job. And if you show up late 8 days in a row, you might get fired, even if you do great work when you show up, or if you start taking money out of the cash register. And why are you fired? Because the company wants to stay in business, and they can't if no one's manning the desk or if money's going out of the company. The government is the same way.
I know that it might not feel like it, and I understand why, but we, everyone in this room, we are the employers, okay? And if you, the boss, want this system to exist, you want operations to continue, but you feel like, the employees are kind of tanking it and you're just gonna lie back and wait for the operation to fail, you need to remember who is in charge.
Around 50% of eligible voters vote. You imagine if that were 60% or 70% or 80%. Everyone has said if we grab one person, get them voting. Politicians are going to have a harder time ignoring individual Americans in favor of dark money and corporate money in politics. So it's going to make your vote matter more if there's a tsunami of civic participation.
Is that stat true, like only 50% of Americans vote?
It varies. In 2020, 2/3 of eligible voters showed up, but that was huge. That was the highest rate since 1900.
1900. So for over a century, only about half of us showed up.
Usually somewhere between half and 60%. The 1940s had a decent-ish turnout, low 60s% range.
All right, so World War II, beginning of the Cold War.
Yep, and then the 1960s was also about the same as the 1940s.
Because it's the 1960s, the civil rights era.
And then it was super high between 1840 and 1900. Like over 80% a lot of the time.
Yeah, antebellum, Civil War, 14th Amendment, the Gilded Age. These are major moments in history. These are major inflection points. Are we in one of those right now, do you think?
I don't know, I'll let the people decide. But yeah, Nick, people show up when they're concerned. And they convince their friends to show up, people who are concerned about the same things as you. And it does make a difference if enough people who care show up, because they prove that their caring actually matters. And Nick, we do not yet know what people are going to call this era of American history. But we do know that when it really matters, people show up. And when they do, they prove that we still have a system where we matter.
It's not every country where, even in a democracy that seems like a democracy, where you really do have a government that is accountable to the people, that is not all in bed with, power brokers and money gangsters. I mean, it's a real privilege. I mean, you could be, maybe you're a religious person that you believe in a higher power. I feel like I'm blessed, and it's a gift to have been born and have my children born in this country. And it's honoring that gift. It's honoring that privilege that not everyone on the planet has. To make sure that we have those freedoms, you have to participate in your democracy, even if you're not going to see the impact tomorrow. Collectively, over many, many races and many, many millions of people, it's the only way. There's no alternative.
So getting back to the whole caring thing, Hannah, as in like, why would I care about the system if the system doesn't care about me? The answer is basically, you have to make the system care about you by showing that you care, by like bending it towards your justice.
And no buts about it, that's hard.
That takes effort. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It takes constant vigilance, and that's hard for people. And so often what I say to people is you can't do everything, but you could do something.
I know that voice. I know she's been on several episodes of Civics 101 over the years.
A true friend of the pod, this is Cheryl Cook-Callio, an all-star of civic participation in America.
I taught for 40 years in a community in which I grew up. I have held elected office. I was a city council member and was termed out after 8 years, and I currently sit on the Alameda County Board of Ed as the president. I have been politically active since I was 17 years old.
I'm a huge fan of hers, but I do not think we can all be Cheryl's.
No, I don't think so. No. But how do we show up for ourselves in civic life, right? If you're feeling down and out, what do? You have to locate your community and work with them to get what you want and what you need. Here's the trick, though, Nick. How do you find your community? I hazard that it's all about how you speak to other people.
I think civil discourse for me, and the way I explain it to my students, is that you can have your opinion based on fact and based on evidence. You just can't make up your opinion. So you can argue, for example, one side or another of a Supreme Court case, as long as you can point to evidence and say it's there. But an argument, to create a situation where your argument is, well, that's just the way I feel and that's my opinion, is not civil discourse.
All right, so for Cheryl, civil discourse is about facts.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And facts can be a whole lot more complicated and way less exciting than feelings. But that is the point.
There's nuances involved. And it's the same thing on a city council. It's the same thing on a school board, is that if you patiently listen to everyone, chances are you're going to find a commonality. And once you find that commonality, you can figure out how to move toward that consensus.
So she said consensus. Where have I heard that word before today?
At its core, it's about doing the work of deciding, of coming to consensus, and engaging in our communities for the best of all.
It's the funniest thing, Hannah. I could swear like I could hear Raj ghostly speaking to me.
It was like clear as a bell. I could hear it too.
Yeah, he said that is like consensus is a big part of what civics is, you know?
Mm-hmm. But let's see if people actually think that's possible. Christina?
Yes. Hello, voice of the audience here. So we asked our audience, think of someone in your life that you disagree with politically. Is there a political issue, local or national, that you think you could agree on, and what is it?
I am very excited to hear this, because I actually think it's possible.
Yeah, okay, so here we go. Yes, inflation, imperialism, the working class being abandoned, money in politics, term limits for Congress. We have an episode on that.
Never gonna happen, is it? No.
I mean, I think you should listen. All right. Character and dignity matters. We agree all of us should leave a positive legacy to be remembered, make the world a better place than how we found it. Love that. And helping others with disabilities. These are some things that people have decided they could find consensus even with someone that they really don't agree with.
I think that's a good, I think that's like a good, that's like a good lead up, and like that's a helpful thing that so many people thought that consensus could be found. But, what do you do once you actually establish consensus? What's the next step?
Okay, so this next step, this is dependent on real civil discourse. Like
Facts.
actual facts, respect, patience, a capacity and ability to compromise. So keep that in mind if you find yourself rolling your eyes at the following scenario.
When you sit down to dinner with your parents at night, they want you to be safe. They want you to get a good education. They want you to have choices. Whether you go to college or trade school or community college, they want you to have choices. If they were honest, they would tell you they want you to have many grandchildren and live close. And they're no different than my family and what I want for my children.
So you find the consensus. Everyone cares about their family. There are certain commonalities. Once you find the consensus, you have to think about the divide.
You are dependent on coal manufacturing. Your parents probably, their livelihood is somewhat either directly or indirectly tied to coal production. In our community, we're trying to stop trains from going through Alameda County that are carrying coal because of the environmental impact. We could not be more opposite on those two issues.
Okay, so coal, that's a big one, is a big divide. So there's the divide, right? Take the divide, take the consensus, and put them together.
And if we could tap into that and figure out how to make sure that people can work jobs that will take care of their families, that's the issue when you're trying to shut down coal, is what are you going to substitute that job with so that the people that have those jobs can actually still maintain a working class, middle class environment.
I think I get Cheryl's point. The question is, what are you really fighting for when an issue matters to you? And sometimes, like maybe even a lot of the time, the answer is safety and security for me and my family and my friends, my community. So if you want to shut down coal to protect the environment, but what about, the people who live there? You need to protect the people who will lose their jobs. Easier said than done.
And in fact, and I know, usually not done at all, right? It's just not done. Like we make a choice and someone else has to deal with the fallout of that choice. But I just think that maybe that's the point of consensus. It is not about getting something done, because we can get things done depending on whether or not Congress votes. But it's about getting something done correctly, about getting something done right, without hurting the thing that you agree on with other people. You might vote for someone who says they'll fix a problem, but you gotta follow up on that. Like you have to stay on them.
It's not just about doing it when you vote. It's all about showing up, and it's all about showing up throughout the duration between elections. To say to somebody who's running for office, I'm important.
So Cheryl's saying, like, you got to hound them. You got to hound your officials.
They do work for you. Remember that little boss thing I was talking about? So Cheryl tells this story. She's at her state house with a bunch of teachers. These are government teachers visiting their legislators.
We ended up seeing 8 or 9 legislators that day, which, having been in a coalition among city council members, and I'll tell you, to get to that many legislators in a day is huge, to get them to see you. So we're sitting at lunch, and I turned around and I said, how many of you have ever contacted an elected official?
Oh. Wait, quick show of hands here. How many of you here have contacted an official? Woo! Give yourselves a round of applause.
For the audience at home, that's way more people than I would have
Yeah,
ever expected.
I think that's the majority of the audience.
I think that was a 94% of people. But to be fair, we do have the 3rd largest legislative body in the world.
Yes, and I think our in-person audience is probably
Civically
more
engaged.
civically engaged, but I'm impressed.
So hats off to all of you, because, for me, cold calling isn't really my favorite thing to do. To just call up. I once called the White House line, and I was on hold for like an hour. And I was like, what am I even going to say? What if he picks up?
Hi.
Do you like anyone?
Okay, this is really interesting because so many of you raised your hands. When our guest Cheryl asked her group this question, here was the answer that she got.
The only 2 people in that group that raised their hand was a former student of mine that became a teacher and my colleague. She and I co-coached a competition civics team. That's it. And I looked at them and I said, why not? And one said, well, they're busy. I said, what do you think they're busy doing? They're supposed to be busy serving you. Their job is to listen to what you have to say. So whether you do this by sending an email or calling an office or seeing them in a town hall meeting, their job is to listen to you. And somebody said, well, you know, it's easy for you. You've been an elected official. And I sat there for a second. I mean, stunned, pretty stunned. These were mid-level government teachers. These were people that had been teaching for 15, 20 years. And I said, I looked at them. I said, how do you think I got to be an elected official?
Wait, so Cheryl said she became a government employee by talking to the government.
And she picked up the phone, made a call to tell her lawmaker what she wanted, and then Cheryl realized that she could make way more of a difference on the inside.
So it was because I picked up that phone first that I ended up in the situation I'm in now. It's not the other way around. And they were pretty stunned. So one of the teachers, when I'm talking about this with this group of teachers, they said, well, I don't want to bother them.
So Cheryl says, do you think that a lobbyist ever thinks that to
A
themselves?
lobbyist that wants them to vote for prescription drugs or not vote for prescription drug prices, do you think they ever worried about whether they were spending too much time in that Congress member's office? Never. Never is the answer to that.
That is a really good point. But I am feeling a little like chicken or eggy in all this.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So do lawmakers cater to special interest groups because they're more important than us? Or do special interest groups make themselves more important than us because they're the ones who actually show up at their house and we don't?
Well, we can't really know the answer to that question unless we put in as many hours as lobbyists do.
Hannah, you've been making something very interesting, maybe even, compelling. You've been making some tremendous points.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But for the sake of argument, and you always tell me the devil doesn't need an advocate, but for the sake of argument, let's say you and all these wonderful civic people that we have heard from, have not been convinced at all.
That would hurt,
Yeah.
actually.
But there's like a Supreme Court decision. Like, I need something to hang my hat on, right? I need something to hold on to in the cold, icy waters, right?
All right. You want something to hold on to.
I want something to hold on to.
Maybe I can give these people just a little bit more to hold on to. Because that is fair, okay? That's fair. Like everything I've been saying, sort of blue sky, stars in the eyes. I understand that. Because...
Now, let's be honest. Inside the federal government, it is a bureaucracy, right?
Mustafa Santiago Ali again. So I concede. The government, elected officials, the law, it can all feel really out of reach. So for something to hold on to, how about somewhere to start?
Can you make change? Oh, most definitely.
Civics does not start in marble halls. The power and the capacity of the people to and for self-governance starts with the people. Community starts with the people. Consensus starts with the people. Coalitions start with the people. You want to be empowered in this democracy-based, constitutionally federated republic? It's a mouthful. It takes a lot of work, okay? But I do want to leave you, the people, with something to hold on to. And you know what? More work is the last thing we need.
Yeah, so is this the part where Jim comes out with the t-shirt cannon with like the...
No, this is the point where I say, if you want to be an effective citizen, if that matters to you, if you want to see your needs and your values reflected in your world, just do your thing.
Do your thing.
I always just ask the question, what's your blessing? What's your gift? And then just take that and just be authentic with what you're doing.
Your blessing, is that like your talent?
Yeah, exactly like a talent. Okay, for example, right, Mustafa told me this story. Someone who really likes writing and really likes drawing and feels like they're pretty good at it, and they also really care about the environment and educating people about the environment.
The other day, I met this guy who was like 77. He was like, yo, check out this graphic novel that I did. And I was just like, this is so great because some folks won't listen. People are not going to read a scientific report probably, but they'll check this out. And then that can inspire folks.
That one actually really speaks to me.
Finally.
No, because I have read books, I have listened to music, I've seen theater, I've seen pieces of art that help me understand the world or care about the world or care about problems in the world.
Yeah, like you can make something that brings people in, that helps them understand something. Or you can take your skill, the thing that makes you unique and special, and you can, actually, Christina, can we do
Yes.
question number 3?
I
Okay.
am way ahead of you. Okay, so question number 3, and this is something, by the way, I think about all the time, just randomly, and just in my bed thinking about it. You find yourself on a deserted island with a bunch of people you know. You have to build a life from scratch. What's your role?
That's why you asked this question.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of roles that people have identified.
Okay.
Food gathering and prep, the cook.
Okay. So as we're getting into this, what I'm trying to share with you is there are ways in, right? There are ways toward civic engagement. So a cook. You can start a community garden that truly brings people together, and it also offers a food source for your community for people in need. You can volunteer at your local soup kitchen, take your skills and bring it to people. One that I'm particularly interested in, school lunches are not always the most delicious thing in the world. Find out what your local public school is feeding your kids. Go to school board meetings and say, hey, I care about nutrition, I care about what we're eating in schools, and here's what I suggest we do. Things happen in schools when people show up to school board meetings, trust me.
All right, you want another one?
Yeah.
All right. I'll be an engineer, making sure we have clean water and a hygienic society.
That's fantastic. I actually care about this one. I have a dear friend who works for an organization called Engineers Without Borders. It's been around since 2000. It's like Doctors Without Borders, but it's engineers. It's people who build infrastructure in communities that need it. And it doesn't have to be in another country. It can be here. It can be in New Hampshire. It can be wherever you live. Creating infrastructure is crucial, and some places really need it.
All right, we got another one, which is a nurse.
Okay, I have this one. I'll take this one. So I'm working on an episode right now called Us versus Healthcare. It's how America measures up against the rest of the world when it comes to how we provide health care for people. And I don't want to, I'm giving away this episode, but in a ranking of the top 10 developed nations in the world, America came in 10th place out of 10 when it comes to the cost of healthcare and the quality we get and how long we live. Anyways, she was telling me, the guest I was interviewing was telling me that if somebody is living in a state or is living in the United States and they're not documented and they break their leg, or they cut off a finger, and they go to the hospital, they must be treated because of EMTALA, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, the emergency medical, the law that says an emergency room has to treat you if you're hurt, doesn't matter if you have money or not. However, that person will get a bill, okay? Unbeknownst to me, there are massive organizations called, I just wrote it down because FQHCs, Federally Qualified Health Centers, that provides medical care on a sliding scale, and it does not matter who you are or how much money you have. This guest said to me, tell people you know to volunteer at, work for, and let other people know about these federally qualified health centers, because it will change the rest of your life if you go to one versus an emergency room.
And other people's lives.
And other people's lives, absolutely.
And I'll say also for those of you who, like me, are not a nurse but have experience with emergency medical services, first aid, first response, consider, a search and rescue, consider storm efforts, storm recovery. Where do they need people to help people find a place to stay, or, to check in on people who might not have air conditioning or heat, those kinds of things. So those are a little bit more low lift. But I have another one, which is bringing a group together to gather resources. Now, that sounds like a fundraiser to me. Yeah.
Come
I know
work
all
in New
about
Hampshire.
that at Public Radio.
And also, it doesn't have to be fundraiser, but, you could be somebody who, in your local community, there's so much federal funds and state funds that can get distributed to local communities, and they need people who apply for that. Like, you don't get it unless you apply for it. If you're somebody who's really good at getting a group together to gather resources, you might be really good at helping to get the information to write a grant. You might be good at organizing people to go after money that your community might need. So consider that. And then we've got another one. I would be a deputy or second in command, a leader, but also a supporting role.
Like a Will Riker,
That's delightful. Yeah.
I had a thought about this one, which is poll workers. And maybe not this election, but next election, there are people who have been working the polls for years. And there are people who have so much experience, they always need people who they can give that experience to.
Is there anybody in here who's worked in the polls?
Oh.
Yeah.
How many of you would like a deputy or a second in command? We can train up to take over for you someday.
A little bit of help, that would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are just a couple of ideas for the deserted island.
Yeah.
Hold on, I think we've got a clip. Let me get myself oriented here. All right.
There's all these different types of things that you can do. Or I've, been so blessed to work with so many younger people who have now created their own organizations and are just adding their own flavor to it. And I'm just like, yes, I'm standing on the sideline cheering. I'm like, give us more, give us more, give us more. So the sky is the limit. So whether you want to work for business and industry, which there are some really great ones that are out there, if you want to work in the nonprofit world, I've been blessed. I've created my own business. I've led nonprofit agencies. I work for the Hip Hop Caucus, so I had a chance to work with all these amazing artists and entertainers. It's up to you. And there are so many folks who are now saying, you know what, I'm not going to wait for change to happen. I'm going to be a part of change. And I'm going to help to move that moral arc that Dr. King once talked about toward justice.
So many of us live two lives. We have a job, we go to work, we do things for a set amount of hours, we get paid, and then when we're done, we go home to be by ourselves or with our families, our partners, our friends. Civics is this third thing. Actually comes from the Latin civis, which has several translations, but my favorite is person in the town. It is, where we get the word city, where we get the word citizen, person in the town. So civics is not just the first Tuesday in November. It is not every 2 years when you step into a voting booth, or 4 years for many Americans. You are always a person in the town. And civics is, at its heart, simply reminding yourself of that. Thank you so much, everyone. That was our show.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. This episode of Civics 101 was recorded live at Southern New Hampshire University. Thank you, Southern New Hampshire University. It was made by me, Hannah McCarthy, by you, Nick Capodice, by you, Christina Phillips, by our executive producer, Rebecca Lavoie, who could not be with us today, by all of you, our audience, without whom we could not make this happen. Music in this episode by Epidemic Sound and Chris Zabriskie. Civics 101 is a production of NHPR, New Hampshire Public Radio.
All right, thank you, everybody. You can feel, so what's happening next? You heard Will talk about it. Go out and grab your lunch. The lunch is right outside. And then, again, there are 3 places you can go afterward. If you go out and to the left, that is where Civics in the Classroom is meeting. And if you go out and upstairs, that is where Inspiring the Next Generation into Action is upstairs meeting. And if you want to talk to Hannah, Christina, and I, go out and grab your lunch and then come back in a little bit. And yeah, thank you again so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Stop recording.
Thank you. Could you mute on the mics for a second?